Hey guys, welcome into the PuggoReborn channel. Today we're going to be going over the next perk that is CS, otherwise known as Crippling Strikes. Now, Crippling Strikes is going to be a longer explanation, so stay tuned through that because afterwards we're going to go into the Puggo RoundTable in which community members get together and talk about this perk and give their consensus on a 1 to 5 grade, 1 being awesome, 5 being terrible. And yeah, and then we'll go from there. If you do like this content, please hit the like, subscribe for more just like it. We have other guides on the channel that are coming forth, definitely worked out through the community. If you'd like to join the Discord and be a part of these projects, by all means you can. Without further ado, let's get into Crippling Strikes. The first thing you need to know about Crippling Strikes is going to be that it causes injuries. The next thing you need to know is what the description says and how it actually works with the numbers behind the perk. So, the description says lowers the threshold to inflict injuries by 33%, both melee and ranged attack. Note, some enemies are immune to injuries or have a large pool of health. Now that the graph is on the screen, I really would like to get your undivided attention if you could just give me your eyes for just a moment. So pretty much, there are two types of injuries. There's light injuries and there's heavy injuries. And those injuries have sub-injuries. So starting with light, you have light body and light head. Heavy injuries have heavy body and heavy head injuries. Now, this is very important because the threshold changes, and I'll bring that chart back up in a moment here. But let's purely focus on light injuries. Light body injuries are procced when you do at least 25% damage to an enemy's health. The example here would be if an enemy has 80 health, you would have to do at least 20 damage, ignoring armor or just pure damage, to cause a light injury. If you're using CS, that brings it down to 16.67% to cause an injury, which effectively means you only need to do 13 hit point damage to cause an injury. That's quite the jump from 7 difference in terms of hit points. Light head injuries are dictated when you do at least 31.25% damage to the enemy's health. If the enemy has 80 health and you hit their head, you need to effectively do 25 damage to their health in order to proc an injury on the head. However, if you're using CS, all you have to do is get 20.83% damage to their health in order to cause an injury. What that equivalates to is 17 damage pure health. That's how you proc it. That's quite a jump, 25 to 17. Now let's get into heavy injuries. To create a heavy body injury, you have to do at least 50% damage to the enemy's hit points. So again, if the enemy's hit points is 80, you have to do at least 40 damage. If you're using Crippling Strikes, however, you only have to do 33% damage to their hit points to cause that. In retrospect, that's only 27 damage compared to 40 damage. Again, a pretty considerable leap. To cause a heavy injury on someone's head, you have to do at least 62.5% damage to an enemy's hit points. If the enemy has 80 hit points, that means you have to do at least 50 damage to cause an injury. Now, if you're using CS, you only have to do 41.67% damage to the enemy, which equivalates to 34 hit points of damage. That's definitely more manageable than 50. With all this being said, I want to dive into heads real quick. Some of you might be wondering, why is the head damage percentage going up so high? Well, the reason is because when you hit a head, it's considered a critical strike, and critical strikes cause a lot of damage. When that happens, you consider constantly proccing massive injuries all the time, so it's got its balance, of course. However, there are 3 different kryptonites that do affect causing injuries in the first place. The first perk that counteracts injuries is going to be Nimble, and pretty much stated, it is a 60% reduction to actual pure hit point damage, and so you only receive 40% of the actual damage incoming, but you have to stay within 15 fatigue on your armor. Now, that may not seem like the biggest deal, but let's say you have 100 health and I do 100 damage to you. I'm only doing 40 damage to you, which constitutes for a light body and light head injury, but not heavy body, not heavy injury. That's assuming that you don't have any armor on, which I highly doubt is going to be the case, so that really affects the threshold as well. Number 2 would be Steel Brow. Steel Brow effectively makes it so you can't do a crit on one's head. Ultimately, you do a 50% extra damage boost when you hit somebody in the head. That is completely negated. So you can add that to the pool as well. Is Colossus. Colossus ultimately gives you a 25% boost to your hit points in general, which technically pulls the threshold farther on really high hit point enemies. And the final thing would be Battleforge. Battleforge makes it so that you have a much harder time to constantly getting into the actual health quicker, and you have to rely on ignoring percentages to armor in order to really kill your opponent or cause injuries. That's a whole nother fight. This is where CS truly cuts the curve because it lowers the threshold, making it easier to cause injuries in general, but also against enemies that are a little higher tier with Battleforge, Nimble, and Steel Brow. So keep that in mind when picking this perk. So with all that being said, CS scales when you have really high damage weapons or, for instance, a duelist. On top of that, it also scales the higher the ignoring armor is on a weapon. You may not do a great deal of damage, but if the ignoring armor is sufficient, you can cause injuries much easier. Before I get into the next CS scaling information, I want to give a shout out to Turtle225 for his work in terms of helping me figure these percentages out to its full extent. The one weapon that I want to talk about with scaling is definitely the Shamshir. The Shamshir has an ability called Gash. When you use this ability, it literally gives you a 33% threshold reduction to the chance to cause an injury. That's exactly the same ability that CS does. Now, when you pair CS with the Gash ability, you're going from 16.67% down to 11.11%. But guess what? It doesn't stop there. You also have the Sword Mastery, which changes the Gash ability from 33% up to 50%. When you pair CS with the Gash ability plus the Mastery, you go from 11.11% all the way down to 8.3%. That is, of course, a massive reduction going from 16 down to 8. So we went over the kryptonite for just base causing damage, right? The percentages and so on. Let's talk about some of the kryptonites that come with CS. Starting out with all the beasts within the game. For instance, Alps cannot take injuries, Ifrits cannot take injuries, Kraken cannot take injury, the Jirok cannot take injuries, and neither can the Shrats. Those are beasts that cannot be injured. Now let's look at the ones that can be injured but are very difficult. Starting out with the Linworm. The Linworm is arguably the most difficult to cause an injury on. Yes, it is possible, but most possible with CS. So again, CS is 16.67% for a light body injury. So doing that on a Linworm would end up being about 175 to 185 damage, somewhere in there. That's a lot of damage in one hit. You'd have to strike them a pure health hit point, but you need to do that much damage to be able to cause that type of injury. Now, this is possible through Killing Frenzy or named item. And then the next thing would be the Unhold. Well, they have 500 health. The base Unholds do. The Frost Unhold has 600 health. The Unhold, what you'd have to do is you'd have to do 83 damage plus 84 damage technically because of rounding up. And you're able to cause light injuries there. If you go heavy body, you have to do at least 33% of 500. There is definitely a chance to cause an insane amount of damage and cause injuries, but ultimately every other animal below that, hyena, direwolf, serpent, the Nagzirs, I don't know how you say it, the nachos as we all know them, they can easily be caused, you can easily cause injuries on them. The other downfall to this is that CS does not do any effect against the undead. And when I say undead, I'm talking about the non-armored wiener gangers, the armored wiener gangers, the fallen heroes, the ancient undead. Now, ancient undead, of course, is all the skeletons. You can't break bones, you can't cause any injuries there, so CS is a null and void perk when it comes to those things. Things you need to know, of course, that are very helpful in terms of having a good outcome. Goblins are also a problem because they have such low health. While the injuries you can cause them is great and all, they're super easy to get all types of injuries in the first place. Falters a little bit in that way. The final thing we need to go over is the actual injuries themselves. There's 4 types of injuries. We have blunt, we have cutting, we have piercing, and finally burning. Now all these are unique injuries. They have their own unique debuffs that you can put on the enemy at will. With all this being said, guys, I hope this does help you have a better understanding of CS. If you do have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below. There's a lot of numbers moving about. If there's a certain enemy you want me to calculate up for you, let me know. Of course, I'd love to be able to provide that as best as possible. Without further ado now, let's jump into the Puggo Roundtable and see what the community thinks about Crippling Strikes. Alright guys, so now we're getting into the Puggo Roundtable. I got a bunch of the guys here to talk about Crippling Strikes a little more in depth, their thoughts and opinions, and then also give you guys a 1 to 5 rating scale, 1 being most likely or use this all the time, or 5 being I don't use it at all. So without further ado, let's start with Baba GANOUSH. What do you think about this perk, man?
Hello, yeah, Crippling Strikes. So the pros here, it's very good for weapons with high armor penetration and effectiveness against armor, like hammers, crossbows, and throwables. Because not only does it injure the opponent, it also and gives it a chance to give it an injury, so that it can render it useless, like a split hand or something. But if you pair it with Executioner, like you get 20% extra damage to that enemy, and it's like can absolutely melt them. And so the cons here. Not all the enemies can receive injuries like the Ancient Undead, which makes this perk completely useless in those fights. And you'll probably do those fights quite a lot, especially in some of the end game stuff. So it's not optimal all the time. And especially, it's also pretty bad for weapons that don't do a lot of damage to armor and penetrate armor. And also, I'll give this a 3 out of 5.
Okay, just out of curiosity, how often do you actually use it? Like, have you gone into the late game with this and felt still it was very promising? Like, do you go out of your way to get this perk?
I've actually only used it 3 times.
Okay.
I've used it on a crossbowman. Right now in this campaign, I'm using it on a thrower, and I think I used it on my handgun as well. No, actually, I'm not using it on my thrower. No, I used it 2 times actually. So because I don't really think it helps that much, because you're already doing enough damage to proc the injuries, you know. So most of the time. So if you spec into damage more, you can still do injuries pretty well.
Right.
I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any questions about anybody? Anybody got any thoughts there or questions for him? Okay. Well, 3 it is. 3 it is. All right, CarveaHole, you have the floor. What do you think?
All right. So, admittedly, I have Crippling Strikes on one person, and I don't think I've actually used it on them yet. Like, I just got it. But the fact that I've played for 500 hours plus and have never considered actually getting it means there's something really holding me back, and that is that so you inflict more, you have a higher chance of inflicting injuries. But how often is someone gonna actually be alive and have an injury for? On your bros, injuries are bad because your bros have to fight multiple battles, sometimes back to back, or they're out of the fight for 3 days. If a brigand gets split hand, he's alive for probably 35 more seconds of real life before he dies. So that injury does basically nothing to him. Like, the amount of time, so it does, Crippling Strikes offers you nothing until they get an injury. So it's useful once you get an injury and before they die. Because once they're dead, it again has it's actively offering you nothing. But the amount of time that an enemy is alive with an injury is very small, because the way you win this game is you kill the enemies. You don't just like injure them and leave them alive because they're still swinging at you. Oh, they have minus 20% chance to hit. They're still going to hit you eventually, just in the way the RNG works. You know, just so you still have to kill them, at which point the injury you just kind of did maybe served its purpose for like 1 or 2 rounds. So while this can be useful, I think, again, it's just a victim of opportunity cost, because there's better perks that will offer you stuff for more frequent amount of time. Like, you know, let's say Killing Frenzy. Every time you get a kill, you're more likely to be getting kills like that will last longer, but that's a 2-round bonus, than like the 1.5 round bonus that the one guy is injured. Because what if that guy like rotates or runs away? Then you've still done nothing because he's not even swinging at you. So it's really really situational as to when you're going to get the bonuses from crippling strikes. So I'd give it like a 4 because there's probably some use for it. I just haven't found it yet.
So one of the questions I do have with that is, what's your thoughts with that being paired with Killing Frenzy? Because that extra damage, and we're talking like, I know that you play for the ultra late game, so when you get to the ultra late game and you can, if you were to pair that with Killing Frenzy, where you're doing an absurd amount of damage, whether it's a two-handed mace or a duelist build, you know that you can really get that damage at a high place to where you can damage even like really high health pool enemies. For instance, a orc warrior, one shot, he might still be alive for 2 to 3 rounds after the fact, but to break his arm or to hit that threshold, how do you feel about that?
I don't like, I clearly haven't been using it, so
Right. Well, just out of observation.
If you couple it with
Yep.
if you couple it with something like, I think coupling with Executioner is the obvious build more than Killing Frenzy. I think Killing Frenzy is a must-have for basically for anyone that attacks. So my couplet would be Executioner, which where you do more damage to people with injuries, but then you're also killing people more quickly. Like once they're injured, so you're shortening the amount of time that they're alive with the injuries. So you're therefore shortening the amount of time that Crippling Strikes is actually useful. So you're in a way you're making it a little bit less useful. I understand that you're killing them quicker, so that's still a bonus, but I just don't think that I don't see it being as useful as some other perks out there. So it's the opportunity cost.
No, and honestly, I think that's a completely fair analysis through and through. I think you hit the nail on the head there. Really, the damage and stuff. What are you really sacrificing here? Where does it actually pull its use when you're getting a lot of killing power and you know that enemy might live one more round or 30 seconds, as you said earlier, in real time, if you will. So I think that's great. I think I can definitely see where you're coming from. So anybody else want to ask him or a question or? All right, Dragon. Let me know. What do you got? What do you think?
Well, to follow up the last point, I believe it's very fair to say that it's basically a companion perk to Executioner, because Crippling Strikes to Executioner, it's like Brawny is to Battle Forge. You need them both together. Separate, they're kinda good, but together they go to a whole different level. And the thing where you kill them before the wound really takes effect, I believe that's the whole point. 2 perks for extra damage is extremely good, because next to no perks or anything in general gives damage. Besides that, I'd like to say that I haven't used it a lot, but I really want to. It sounds like it would be good on throwers, on crossbowmen, I don't know, because they only attack once, on people with maces and hammers, either duelist or two-handers, because they have a good amount of armor penetration, and the injuries that they produced are the best ones. Blunt injuries are the best, because you can get concussions, fractured elbow, all that nice stuff. And as a closing point, I've been kind of like crafting a little bit a build with a Crippling Strikes, Executioner, and Sword Mastery for the Southern Swords, for the Shamshir, because with all of that together, if you do a gash with Crippling Strikes and Sword Mastery, you have like an 83% lower threshold to inflict injuries, and then start smashing them with the normal attack, duelist, double grip, and executioner bonus. That sounds like a lot of fun. And a better alternative to just use riposte, which I don't like. So for me, it's gonna be a 4 out of 5, but I'm willing to go up to 3 out of 5. But I'm gonna stick to 4 for now.
And it's good points there. Any questions from anybody?
I just want to say that I think I'm gonna switch my rank to a 4.
Okay. And you were, what, Baba Ganoush, yours was 3, was it not? Or
Yeah, it was
Okay.
3 before.
Okay. Okay, very good. And next would be Shinobi. What do you got? What do you think?
So I think you're going to have to pop up a disclaimer that the views expressed by this man do not reflect the general public. For me, Crippling Strikes is a 1. All day, all the way, baby.
Woo!
I don't know what
There we
this
go.
game did to me in my first 2 runs, but it turned something on inside of me. I was having brothers murdered left and right, getting injured, infected. I couldn't find a monastery, had my guys with permanent injuries left and right. And it's like, you know what, game? I see your work. Two can play. So I started throwing crippling strikes on everybody just for fun. And oh my goodness, it is some of the most fun I've had. Just having my high level archers sitting back there with crippling strikes, raining arrows down on the terrified masses, piercing hands, cheeks, sides, chests. It doesn't matter. Like, I turn everybody into pincushions with this perk. It is amazingly fun to just watch. It doesn't even matter if you're doing damage. One of the best things I ever did with this perk was stack 5 injuries on one orc warrior. I think, God, what did we do?
That's absurd.
He busted his leg, pierced his cheek, concussed him. He was in rough shape, man. And then I just kind of left him there. Well, we mopped up all of his friends just to watch him flail around, try to help. You know, we could see the sadness in his cold, dead orc eyes as he watched his brethren fall, powerless to do anything about it. I love this perk.
That is. You got any more? You can raid more out there. That's good.
It brings so much joy to me. You know, you're fighting a noble house. Their bannerman has this smug look on his face, catches an arrow to the cheek. He's not smiling anymore. Nobody else is smiling either, except all of us. It adds a level of entertainment, personal enjoyment, adds some depth to the battle when I'm sitting here playing and just having some fun telling a story to myself. It's a great perk. I don't even take executioner. I don't care. I just want to cripple them.
Very good. Well, anybody got any questions or thoughts or anything you want to throw in there?
Yeah. Not a question, but just an exclamation. I don't agree with what you say, but I wholeheartedly like your enthusiasm.
Oh man, it's the thing. Like, is it practical? Nah, not all the time. But man, it sure is fun.
But damn, isn't it fun to split the hand of that brigand leader?
Absolutely.
All right.
Clubbing knees, crushing windpipes. It's amazing.
Oh, 100%. Anybody else? All right. Well, then we'll go on to Snuck. What do you think about crippling strikes?
I'm gonna start just by giving it a grade to know where we are. I'm giving it a 4, but with a mention that can become a 3 in the certain scenario. I've been playing Battle Brothers since before the Northern expansion, so in the beginning it was like a 2, solid 2. I would almost always take him on the frontliners or on two-handers. I loved it. It was like Shinobi said. It was so perfectly awesome to see them crippled and with the inability to protect themselves or to attack. It was awesome. But after the DLC, this last DLC, I stopped using archers. I was taking a lot of time this perk on the archers, so it fell off for me. But it's a free because it's a situational. I can see him as a free just because I have a build that I always use in all of my saves. I have a certain type of build that I love it, and I love it to come. So I love to take the crippling strikes together with executioner and berserk, and of course with bag and belts, because if you're having crippling strikes with executioner and berserk and you're throwing axes at somebody, you're gonna use a lot of axes, and you're gonna need to have like 3 to spare in your bags and belts. I love to build this guy in all of my saves. I have 1 or 2 in my company, just throwing axes at everybody and just crippling them, and with that berserk, man, it's great. But it stays like a 3 to 4. I don't know where. I don't see any other use to it, really. I don't.
I like it. I think that's awesome. I think you hit both sides of it. You hit the fun, and then you also hit kind of the mid-max type of thing.
It's fun, and that build that I'm using, it's great. I love it, but I don't see any other use in another. I don't see replacing other perk for another brother. I don't see it.
Right. No, I think that's completely fair. I agree with that. Anybody else? Anybody got a question for him or anything? Or Oh, well then I'm gonna ask Snuck, how do you feel about like I want to kind of throw with the Shinobi side because you share that same fun, loving side of it that Shinobi does. How do you feel about it with archery, like any kind of archery?
I love it. I love it with a classical archer.
With a classical archer.
Yes,
Okay,
a classical archer is awesome. But I have like
absolutely.
three out of 4 saves. I don't use a classical archer now.
Okay.
I'm just replacing all the archers with axe throwers or any kind of thrower, even with a heavy armor, because they are more utility. I can go with them in the front line. I don't have to hide. I don't have to stay from a distance. It's better. So when I use an archer, yes, it's worth it. But if I don't use an archer, nah.
Shinobi, did you have something you wanted to add in there?
The deadliness of your archers with crippling strikes, man. It seems like every other shot you're injuring them. Pluck an arrow out there, you get an injury. It's just so fun.
No, I agree. There is a lot of fun there. Oh, go ahead.
I do think like when you start the fight, you're quite far apart, and if you have an archer with crippling strikes and executioner, you can shoot them and do a lot of damage to them before they have come to your front line. So they will be more weakened, you know.
Right.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything else? And then otherwise, I'll jump into my. All right. So pretty much this is my side of it. I look at it as if you're playing for the ultra late game, it can easily fall between a 4 and a 5. And the reason I say even touching 5 is because it doesn't work against the undead. It doesn't work against ancient undead. And it won't. You can't. The odds of you injuring a Lindworm or causing an injury is so minuscule. I mean, you have to really pump. It's possible with the right weapon and the high end damage. It's possible, but very unlikely. A lot of times when you're facing unholds, they have a huge pool of health, and you have to hit a certain threshold. So like temporary injuries. Let's say you're using blunt. If you're gonna take injuries or use injuries, I really like blunt weapons in particular because of the blunt, like your debuffs for like a broken arm, for instance. If you can hit 50% of their health, you get that one shot on them. It's negative 50% melee, 50% range, and the next hit is 50% extra damage because they get a negative 50% damage. Or no, I'm sorry, they can't do any damage to anybody else. They have a negative 50% damage inflict. So this is where I'm coming from with this. Now, if I am playing the game in a unique, fun way, or even into the ultra late game, I give it still a 4 or a 3. If I'm rounding it off, I'm gonna give it a 3, just because it is insanely fun. For one, like you guys were talking about, it's insanely fun. But the big thing is, with a blunt weapon doing an AoE damage, a named weapon in particular, one swing can do, if you debuff every single one of those guys, you break limbs. They don't have any what is it, the kneecap? What's the kneecap one here? Or no, fractured elbow, negative 25% melee. A crushed hand, a smashed hand, negative 40% melee skill. Anything, fractured hand, 25% max hit point, or I'm sorry, that's how much you need to inflict. All you need to do is a threshold of 25% of anybody's hit points, and you can get a fractured elbow, which we all know is devastating. CS makes it all that much more possible. I want to start with like Shamshir. Shamshirs, you get a 33%, plus you get an extra 33 with CS, but it's I want to just say from my point of view, it's a terrible weapon to have it with because you have to be into the actual pure hit points because it does not do a lot of ignoring armor. But the scaling of using a duelist, for instance, can make the change for this perk in general, because every time you hit somebody, you're getting those other buffs to your pure damage. I know that CarveaHole was bringing this up, it's really hard to tell, because if I know I'm gonna either one shot this guy or have almost kill him, the next round he's more than likely gonna die. My only counter, even because I agree with that logic to that type of logic, is if you hit a bro or you hit an enemy and you crush their hand, you fracture their elbow, not even fracture, anything where you're debuffing their chance to hit you, you can immediately let them swing away because they're going to get only a 5% chance every time they swing, and you can focus on somebody else. Every time I see somebody who has a severe concussion, who has a broken arm, broken leg, or any of these big time injuries, I don't focus on them anymore. They're irrelevant. They don't have a place. So eliminating a guy that I don't have to hit anymore and just let him die, I can focus on other people. And that's where I think blunt weapons in general have such an advantage with this weapon. Named weapons, and of course, as I was saying, the duelist. Now, if we're going to the range side of things, when you hit something with range, you can debuff so many people before they actually crash into your line that it just, again, makes the fight that much easier. I think it's probably best used on crossbowmen because of the ignoring armor into their health, causing them to be weakened even before they get to you, and a lot of times they'll rotate themselves out and get cut off. So the final thing I want to say on it that matters, we already went, well, if you guys watched the fast adaptation video, we talked about handguns. If it hits somebody's head, an exposed head, it's absolutely devastating with crippling strikes. But the big one, arguably the hardest fight in the game, is the barbarian camps. The Chosen have 130 hit points, and a lot of times it's very difficult to cause injuries on them because it's just the right amount of hit points and enough armor that it makes it difficult. But with fat crippling strikes, you can, dude, you can do so much damage to some of the hardest opponents in the game, which is Chosen barbarians. You can literally, with their throwing axes, I know that was brought up, or throwing weapons in general, it's so good with throwing weapons because the damage that you're doing beyond the armor is going to cause crushed fingers. It's going to cause, if you hit a head, a concussion. That's instant because it's a 50% extra damage on hit. So there's something to probably be said about Headhunter with this perk, even beyond Executioner. And a lot of times I don't pair Executioner with crippling strikes because you need, first off, you're giving away 2 perk points and 2 that you might not use in general, and that's just that's why I consider it more of a fun, unique build. But if you go with just Executioner and you have weapons that are incredibly damaging, that you don't need it, where you can cause an injury on a Barbarian Chosen, it'll proc itself. You don't need that extra 25% or 20% extra damage to them, especially because like CarveaHole was saying, they are pretty much dead anyway. So that extra killing power just makes his head pop off his shoulders ultimately. And while that's cool, it was unnecessary. So that's why I don't use Executioner usually with crippling strikes. I do them separately. But it's, at the end of the day, guys, it's an incredibly fun perk that you can just steamroll, or not steamroll, but you can just absolutely kill the will of whoever you're fighting. So yeah, that's my ultimate thought. I don't know, I kind of jumped around there, but there's a lot to be said in the fun and mid-max category. Any thoughts, comments, questions?
Yeah, I want to disagree with you a little bit there. You say that when you when you injure an enemy, give them like smashed hand, they have minus 40% chance to hit, so you leave them there. They serve no purpose. I think killing them actually does a lot of things for you. For one, it does it can make your guys confident by getting a kill.
Yep.
It can ruin their morale. It can open up a hex for new enemies to come in so they don't run around your flank, or for your guys to move in. And then it can what else can it do? It removes, sometimes if you don't have underdog or if they have backstabber, it removes some melee defense from them. It can do a lot of things. And then, if enemies, once they get onto a certain number, they start fleeing. So if you just kill 5 extra enemies, they will they might just start running, like guys in the back line might start running. So by getting these extra kills, you're actually doing a lot, even if the enemy is kind of useless. And if they're still rolling on 5s, if a Barbarian Chosen's rolling on 5s, it's still bad. Like, it's not, obviously, it's pretty, safe. But I would like to just, get that. If that's an easy kill I can grab, I'm going to do that.
Oh, for sure.
It
Yep.
gives me advantages.
I mean, that defeats the purpose of making him watch you slaughter all of his friends.
That is very. I'm not sadistic like you, Shinobi. All right.
I think if you play Battle Brothers, you're a little sadistic because it feels good. Sadistic. It feels good. Well, let me go ahead. What were you gonna say, Bob Ganoush?
No, I was just agreeing.
Oh, okay. So let me answer. Oh, go ahead, Snuck.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something. Especially with my build, with the throwing axes.
Yep.
You're proccing berserk when you're killing a guy, you're proccing. So you have an extra attack, an extra morale check, an extra possible kill. It's an
It's
extra
fuzzy too.
action you can do.
Right. No,
That's awesome.
and I agree with that. So this is my, when I was saying that, I'll tell you what I was kind of thinking. I guess I didn't make this thought process completely refined. So ultimately, if you have a brother, I'm thinking I'm using my favorite weapon in the game is a two-handed hammer. So if I do an AoE, right, and I hit somebody and totally wreck the one guy in the end, he ends up getting demolished, right? Like he's got a fractured skull. When I see that, I instantly think he's done. He taps out. Any one of my brothers can kill him at that point. I don't put CS on everybody, but if I'm talking about the brother who has CS, I would use him to focus on other brothers or other enemies to cause injuries where my backline, like archers or my brother next to me or whoever else, can kill that brother, and it'll be an easy, quick kill. Now, in terms of Berserk, if I do an AoE and he survives and I kill somebody else, I'm still more reluctant to go kill that one guy and go after somebody else for the sake of trying to kill them or cause the same injury, or if not worse, getting that kill. Understandably, if I do kill somebody else, then this guy he's just sitting duck for death at the end of the day. And when you do cause injuries, guys, just know this as well. If most of you guys probably already know this, but when you cause injuries or you hit the hit points to a certain point, there's a threshold where there's a morale check anyways. So that morale check will spread to other people. You injuring somebody or making a morale check affects everybody around them anyways. So yes, maybe a kill will do more in terms of the morale check, but my thought process is if a guy is useless and I have an extra attack, I'm gonna go after somebody else to cause more morale checks or to kill somebody because I know this guy is gonna be useless and he will be killed within a round. You see what I'm saying? That's my thought process because I don't give CS to everybody. It's very specific builds. Does that kind of answer?
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
I had a question for you.
Yeah, go for it.
You said that you need to do 25% of their HP to proc a wound. Is that
Yep.
right?
It depends on the injury.
Oh.
Yeah, it depends on the injury. So here's the deal. There's two types of injuries. There's four types of injuries. There's light body wounds, light head wounds, or heavy body wounds and heavy head wounds. And so the light ones are procced after 25% of their hit points. You beat that threshold. You got to understand that that's based on the hit points itself. When you use CS, it's based on the weapon hitting the body. It's part of the weapon. I don't have the numbers. I'll put them up when I make this video. I'll put up the numbers so people can actually see it. But to give a little more context to this, when you talk about blunt injuries, a light blunt injury either gives you fractured elbow, which is negative 25% melee, and even if it's only 25% of their health. So if they have 75% of their health left, he just became significantly easier to kill. You get fractured hand also at 25% threshold, and that's negative 20% to the melee skill and range skill. That's huge for knocking them down. And of course, and then there's finally the fractured ribs, which there's some other ones too, crushed fingers and bruised legs, but these are the big ones here. There's fractured ribs, which is negative 30% of the max fatigue. Do you see what I'm saying with that? Ultimately, yeah. And for instance, even like the head, if you hit past the 50% max hit points threshold, as soon as you pass that, you can get that severe concussion. All it takes is one hit to the head. And I'm telling you, with a 50% extra damage from a crit, that is not hard to do for most enemies, even Barbarian Chosen. Because if you have like a mace or you have a hammer, or it doesn't, I'm only going by blunt injuries. They've actually updated cutting injuries too to do more. Like cutting arm is 15% and so on. So yeah.
The reason I asked was just looking at it when you people were talking.
Mm-hmm.
Just sword mastery and crippling strikes and a shamshir reduces the threshold of wounds by 83%.
Right.
That means you need to do 5% of their HP for light wounds and 10% for heavy wounds.
The only problem...
Sounds like an incredibly fun
It
build.
is incredibly fun, but just remember, the only thing to this is, it makes it difficult because of how much... I understand that there's a greater chance to actually cause an injury with a shamshir. The problem is, the ignoring armor only goes up to 20%. And that's minuscule when you think about it. And when I say 20% also, you have to connect. You have to hit at like 40, let's say 45, and understand that when you go ignore armor, it's a percentage. Either you're going to do 1% or you're going to do 20%. Most people think when you hit something, you automatically get the 20% ignoring armor. That's not true. You do for effectiveness against armor. The only time it fluctuates is the pure damage. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think we're not looking at the entire numbers because you wouldn't for this to be effective you need to account for things like double grip and dualism,
Yep.
you don't do as much damage to the HP, but the minuscule damage you would do, or the light damage you would do, would still be enough for wounds, and then start whacking them with execution every turn.
Right.
It sounds like fun.
Oh no, it is definitely fun. Just make sure that if you're gonna build it out, that's how you got to build it though. You have to build with those stacks. So you just have to make sure that you're building duelists, because if you've ever faced a assassin will come in with a Shamshir and they will wreck you because of that. But it's a very specific. I mean, you have to have a level 1 brother and say this guy is going to be a Shamshir. He's going to be a Shamshir duelist. And you know what I'm saying? He's got to be already fleshed out in your mind. If you get to level 7 and say, well, now I have to invest in CS. I'm officially going to go with duelist. You have 5 perks, or let me see, depending on if you have a student, I guess. So 8, 9, 10, 11. Yeah. So you have 4 perks to make that happen. That's my only throwback when it comes to that, because just a pure Shamshir walking in, you're just not, it's going to be difficult for one person to make it happen right from the get. You have to have the plan in mind.
Oh yeah. I'll say that it sounds like an rather interesting build for an on-hold slayer.
Oh
because
yeah.
They don't have armor. If you catch them once, you are going to wound them because you are going to make 5% of their HP. Start whacking them with executioner, and it should be a good on-hold slay build.
Right. Let me actually pull that up real quick. I'm very curious, and again, I'll put the graphics up as well. I just want to see what an unhold's health is, because I think it's like 300 maybe.
About 600.
About 600.
I just want to. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no. I was just, it's so a normal unhold bog, or just a normal unhold is 500. The frost unhold is 600. I don't know. I think there might be something missing here. I just don't know what it is. Either way, I mean, it's very possible. Whether it's, I'd have to test it with a Shamshir. I'd have to put the numbers out in front of me to really see it. But I'm sure you're correct about it. The only thing I'd say is a mace or a blunt weapon with an absurd amount of damage, or a two-handed axe, you could definitely do it.
Oh,
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, if you pair it with like a hammer, like a one-handed hammer, you just use the ability where you break the armor and then switch to the Shamshir.
Yep.
You could it could be way more effective.
There you go. It's worth a shot at least. I mean,
interesting.
the big
That's
thing.
a really interesting idea.
Yeah, and here's the other thing, guys. The biggest thing for me, like, I play this game again. I play it for the unique, fun, and then mid-max type of stuff. I try to play across the board, and this is one of those things where it's like, I encourage anybody who's watching this, go out and do this build. Have fun with it. Have fun with CS, otherwise Crippling Strikes. Because like Shinobi said, whether he looks at it as a 1 or somebody else looks at it as a 5 or 4 or whatever, there is so much. This perk is like the definition of Battle Brother fun. Okay? Like, there's no mincing words about it. But that is an awesome, it'd be an awesome build to try. Especially if you can get a famed or a named one as well. That'd be even crazier.
It's also worth saying that a Shamshir plus Assassin Armor and Mask has a lot of style.
Oh, hell yes. Hell yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I don't. I'll drink to that. That is 100% true.
You're crippled them with fashion.
Yeah, right. The best looking guy is probably the most dangerous. But just remember, guys. Just remember, as much as I hate to be a Debbie Downer on the weapon, as soon as you fight a zombies, or you fight any kind of undead, or you fight the ancient legionnaire or whatever, the ancient army. Ancient undead, there we go, I couldn't say it. It becomes completely irrelevant. All them stat jumps. So if you had but the nice thing is if you go with the mastery and you end up with, like, you could always switch out with a noble sword or something, or switch out some other way. Ideal, so you're not losing all that momentum with the weapon. But if you're facing anything else that can cause an injury, that's gonna be fun. I don't care who you are, regardless if it's the best strategy in the world or not. That is gonna be a freaking great deal of fun.
I guess it's a good point to say that this whole crippling thing with a Shamshir just gives some more flavor and sense to sword duelist build, which usually are pretty boring because you can only hit because riposte is weird and gash is useless. So I believe this is like a sword duelist plus.
Dude, I love Red Post. So maybe instead of the next roundtable, we do a Battle Brothers fashion show.
Yeah.
Round up a lot of agents.
There's a lot to come though, guys, because with the round table, there's going to be, it's not just going to be perks. We're going to go into the retinue. We're going to go into everything Battle Brothers. We'll even do like swords and maybe just sit down and talk about swords individually, you know, arming swords to the exotic swords of fencing and, of course, the Shamshir of the world. So we'll definitely have to do videos down the road for that. But were you going to say anything? What were you going to say?
Yeah, one last thing I wanted to say to you. I was looking at one of your videos the other day. I believe it was top 10 backgrounds for valuable recruits. You need to do one of those for Blazing Deserts.
I know. Yes, we will. We will definitely do something. I honestly, logistically, I got to look at how I want to go about it because my mind has changed a lot on that guide since. Or just for fun. That was just a fun freaking give people the real in-depth about a brother and what my thoughts were generally. So I don't know. I'm worried about like doing a round table about it because it's such a long process, as you guys saw. Like one video was 2 hours. We'll definitely figure something out. But the round table is gonna stick around for sure.
Oh hell yeah!
Yeah, this is fun.
That's for life though.
I think backgrounds are much more objective.
It is.
Like a Detailer is bad. Like you can't. There's no discussion. A Detailer is a bad background.
No, actually, I've had a really good Detailer tank.
Okay, cool. You had a good Detailer.
But it ain't gonna make your top 10. I'll tell you that right now.
No.
And if it does, God bless your soul, man. Because
yeah, you have some really low standards with the Detailers making it up there.
He's like, you listen here. Holy cow, that was.
Drags a tailor around, just hoping to get him to piece something together one day.
There is some objective things, 100%. But to be fair, there are a lot of good backgrounds. There's a lot more good than there is bad. Although the bad is pretty dang bad. And I can say this too. I know there was a guy on Reddit. When I first jumped into Reddit, there was this link that I went to, and somebody beat the monolith with a cripple. He went through.
Dude, I love cripples.
Yeah, dude. He beat the whole game with just a cripple, and he did it
A single cripple?
a single freaking cripple. And honestly,
I actually kind of like cripples.
I think he did it. Don't quote me. I'm sure somebody who will maybe a year from now will comment in the comment section and say who it was. But if I could be wrong about this, but I think he actually did an Iron Man also. It was probably one of the greatest feats that have ever been done in Battle Brothers. Might even be the greatest. It's insane.
I saw someone beat Monolith in 45 days.
Oh yeah,
That's
but
crazy.
that's where
the cripple is pretty up there too. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know. Well, this is a whole nother discussion, guys. We're gonna go down a rabbit hole here, but yeah. But anyways, guys, any other comments on CS?
It's the best.
It's the best. All right, can I get it's the worst? No, everyone's not going to say that. I don't think it's the worst,
love
but
crippling and we love cripples.
all right. Yeah, we can make
A
cripples.
cripple with crippling strike.
Yeah.
Why buy a cripple when you can make somebody become a cripple? It's beautiful. So
You can make a cripple with a cripple.
right. Oh man, it'd be just cripple wars out there with this bad boy. But anyways, guys, I thank you guys, everybody who is a part of the roundtable again today. I really appreciate it, guys. If you do like this video, please hit the like, subscribe for more content like this. Also, I do want to I want to give a shout out to other channels too, because there's going to be other channels that will have this on there. CarveaHole, thank you. And Snuck, you're going to be having something on yours, right?
It's not a channel. It's a Discord with 2,500 people.
Well, then there's that. So hopefully to see you from there. Let us know where you saw the video and stuff. It's awesome. And if you guys want to be a part of the roundtable as well, you can always jump into this Discord. Every one of my videos now has the link to do so you can just check it out in the description section, and you have a chance to be a part of this. So hopefully we see you guys soon, and we will talk to you later. Bye.